Today, I'm talking to Sundar Katwala, who's the director of British Future, a very influential organization. And Sundar's done a lot of work, polling, analysis down the years on integration and questions around racism as well. And in the aftermath of what happened on Sunday night with England and the football, he's made some very interesting observations about where we really are. So I thought I would invite him onto Reaction on YouTube. If you're not a subscriber, just click the button underneath the video and like our video. And if you're not a subscriber to Reaction, the main website, go to the site and there's a 30-day free trial where you can read all the work that the team does. Sundar, welcome.
Good morning, Ian.
So I wanted to talk to you today about what you think the real picture is. We've had a lot of righteous anger about the abuse that the players faced. Where do you think we are? I mean, you've described this inclusive England team as a very important, sending a very important signal. How would you quantify things?
I think we've seen some very ugly scenes on social media. We've seen overt racism against the players. We also saw ugly scenes in and around the stadium, and it was not a good occasion, I think, for a major final, England's major final. So clearly there's more to do when it comes to racism, when it comes to violence and hooliganism at football. I'm an optimist about England and English identity. That's partly my life, and it's partly the age I am, I think, because I'm in my late 40s, and I was the football maddest 8-year-old in the country in 1982, and I had Shoot magazine on subscription at the newsagent. And would Kevin Keegan be fit to go to Spain was such a massive national crisis. It put sort of Brexit and things like that very much in context. And nobody said, Sundar, what has that got to do with you? Why do you think you're English? When I was 8, this was very, very simple. Now, by the time I was a teenager, I'd found out that some people didn't think Sundar Katwala was English. Norman Tebbit thought I should definitely cheer for England at cricket, which I actually did, but that was awkward. And other people thought you can't be English. So I was a club football supporter. I supported Everton. I had a season ticket there when I was 12 after a massive campaign to get tickets, to get my dad to take me. I was quite a naive 8, 9, 10-year-old. And the culture at Everton, where there were no black players, was very racist. If Arsenal, Aston Villa played, and it was over and it was all around you, and people were saying Everton was white. But England was much worse. And so England just had the reputation for having the worst culture. And we associated English football when I was a teenager with everything that was xenophobic, racist, nationalist. If I was to sum up my image of England fans in a European tournament, it would be going somewhere like Brussels, smashing up some stuff and shouting, if it wasn't for the English, you'd be Krauts at everybody, probably with the odd fascist salute. So quite a mixed up view about the Second World War there.
And why was that? Why did it attract that crowd?
The National Front were there in an organised way. At England, at Chelsea, at Leeds. The policing was brutal. The fans were drunk or hooliganistic. And I suppose, there have been a lot of, white English supporters who would then have thought, I don't want to go and be there. But I just would never have gone. I was watching Everton, there was racism now. I would never have gone and watched England away, because you just, around Wembley as well, it was mixed, it was edgy. But you might have a really nice day and there'd be a great goal. You might have an absolutely terrible day, but you would just not have been confident about your experience.
Yeah.
England, it was hostile. So it was in my early 20s, Euro 96, that really mattered to me. I was part of anti-racism movements. We used to put out giant St. George's flags by arriving 6 hours early, anti-racism messages, put the opponent's flag out too. This was very inclusive patriotism. And we were working at that from ground level up. And Euro 96, we just won that argument. It was an inclusive Englishness. 3 Lions is a very soft, not we're the best, we invented the game, foreigners will never beat us. Just we won it once. You never know. So there's a softness about that. Now that really mattered to me. That made me so much more confident about England and Englishness, because that argument in the stadium, it was only the previous November, Combat 18 had rioted in Dublin and got Ireland versus England called off. So that contest, some of it is organised and some of it is just the general culture of where are the fans. The tipping point for me was Euro 96. But Euro 96 was, it was inclusive in spirit, but there was the toxicity and the hostility wasn't there. It didn't feel dangerous anymore. It wasn't very diverse. It was an aspiration. And what I think we've seen post 2000, post 2010, 2018, 2020, this mattered to Black and Asian fans, but also women, people going with your families. You might think that'll be good. That'll be fun. I'll take the kids. The atmosphere has shifted in that direction. So there's always been a mixture of good experiences and bad experiences. But the strength in numbers element, that if you go and celebrate in the street with your England flag on, people aren't looking at you and thinking, why are you the only Asian or Black guy here? What's it got to do with you? Because if you look at the pictures from Croydon, you look at the pictures from Birmingham, it's just a norm now that we've got this inclusive Englishness. And people who have had the English flag waved in their face to tell them they're not English, which I think has been the experience of British Muslims, post 7/7 and so on, have been adopting the flag in the summer when it's about football to say, me too, count me in. I'm part of this. So that was the inclusive Englishness that I was so proud to see really break out and be visible. I think we had it 3 years ago in the World Cup. Football's often a show not tell thing. France 98 was very diverse. It's a divided country, but they celebrated their diversity when they won. But what happened in 2018 and 2021 is the England team also told the story of what they understood that diversity to mean, why they were proud to represent that England. So, two Englands are there all along. What we see in our data is a massive shift in the direction I want to see across the generations. And England's a strange country. It's a stateless nation. It has very few public places. We haven't seen the public engagement with a civic Englishness that I think we have seen in Scotland. I think we've seen in Wales to some extent.
And you say that because it's a large country, it's the largest part of the union, but it doesn't have its own direct political representation or manifestation. It's the biggest part of the UK.
So there's no one there to speak for England because it doesn't have English institutions. And so we have a football team, a cricket team, and a rugby team that have really changed who is English in a very profound way in my lifetime. And we have a slightly agnostic Church of England that, is not very central to the national culture. And that's more or less it for English institutions. And so that's why, for me, football has done tremendous thing. I mean, Cyril Regis got bullets in the post saying, don't work on the turf and play for your country. There was a ferocious argument, essentially with the organised far right, about who was English. And I think they won that by 1990. There'll be Black players on the pitch. When you look at England, you'll look at an England that's got Black players in it. We haven't had any Asian players. That was won by the 90s. We've had 100 Black players for England. And it's a third of the players. It's much more diverse than the country because it represents 20-something urban England, the team. And the team have embraced that. I think this is the debate we're having overnight. Lukaku once said of Belgium, I'm Belgium when I score, but if I don't score, am I Belgian? And that was his sense of the culture, that the bar to be in was so high that you'd be out again. It's not my view of this generation of English players, even the Ian Wright generation of English players, that you're thinking if it hits the post, it doesn't go into the net, you don't count anymore. You're not in the team. I don't believe that's where we are with Marcus Rashford. I just think we are us. There's been this shift. The other reason is that, Britishness, we worked on it as a civic identity. The far right groups used British identity. That was the BNP. That was the National Front. The EDL using English identity was quite late. But you would have said to people like my dad from India, have a British passport, be British. He supports India at cricket. Nobody said to my dad, do you want to be English? And so his generation of Commonwealth migrants would have assumed that British identity was a civic, inclusive identity. White British people thought that. And then this unspoken conversation about Englishness, you assumed it was an ethnic identity. Once Scottishness was given recognition in public in devolution, there was an effort from unionists and nationalists in Scotland to say Asians should wear kilts. Asians can be Scots. We haven't seen that effort in England, but the surprising thing is that the English-born children of the migrants turned out to feel they could be English too. And I think their parents weren't expecting that. And half of the minority population were English-born. I mean, one minority group this was a surprise to were the Irish. Jack Charlton's Irish team is drawn of, the Irish diaspora in England. This England team is actually drawn of the children of Ireland. Some of them have thought of playing for Ireland, some of them played for Ireland. Harry Kane never thought of playing for Ireland because his generation of Irish descended English people were English with an Irish heritage. And what has happened, perhaps surprising people, is that Black Caribbeans, Black Africans, British Asians have gone on that journey, but we haven't ratified this because we talk about Black British, British Asian. The words English Asian, English Muslim, Black English, they're unfamiliar words. We haven't got that language, but we've got a thing, a football team that represents that. So we want that foundational question you're in. The attitudes shifted strongly in that direction, firstly among young people who've grown up in multi-ethnic classrooms with kids from different ethnicities who've born in England. And actually what's happened in the last 10 years is that older people have adopted it too. They used to have open Britishness, Englishness, that's a different category. And now if you ask them, but hang on, what about Ian Wright and Paul Ince? They'll say, oh yeah, definitely, of course, yeah, we're all English. So we've won that foundational argument, and the group against that has shrunk from 1 in 5 to 1 in 10 in the last decade.
So it's that scale of progress then. So it's diminished to that extent that it's the data tells a very positive story about how Englishness is now perceived, and attitudes have changed. But then something else is going on simultaneously, isn't it, with the rise of social media? Because in the aftermath of England losing, there was then this sort of surge in racist tweets. Try and quantify that for us, and also I'm trying to get a picture of how many we're talking about. And also Gareth Southgate himself said something very interesting on Monday about some of it coming from trolls outside England, outside the UK. How do you see it?
So social media is so important here, and it's kind of changed my mind and, you know, shaken my own confidence a bit, even though I'm quite confident. So I just want to tell you one other twist in the story of Englishness, that when we ask the question, do you have to be white to be truly English, or is Englishness for people of all ethnicities and races who identify as English? The white population, the white to be truly English is down to 14%, which is higher than I want, but it's down to 14. And then quite a bit of that is actually anti-racist opinion, saying it's a shame, but other people think that. So it's about 1 in 10 that are being ethnically exclusive. Among our ethnic minority respondents, 1 in 5 give the ethnically exclusive answer. And so it feels more closed to the minorities than to the white population now, because this is reciprocal. If I say I'm English too early and people say, no, you're not, then that's fine. But actually the white population is now broadly saying, yes, you are. But ethnic minorities, older ethnic minorities haven't heard that story.
Interesting.
Don't believe that story. Younger ethnic minorities do. And there's a fascinating story here about, I think, inclusive nativism. We think about nativism as Trump and Salvini, but actually the credential of being British born means that you can be English born and English. 95% of the minorities are English. And so that ends the argument. You know, you might have said, oh, there's a different cultural background, but if you say, well, Ian Wright, he's born here. So the birthplace trumps ethnicity. Yeah. And so for the younger generation, it's an of course question. And for older minorities, it's a kind of, oh, we weren't categorizing it in that way. We were going to be British Indian, community of communities, multiculturalism, you're English, we're Indian. And then the kids are like, but I'm Indian at cricket, I'm English at football, I'm English with an Indian heritage. So that's why this inclusive England message, everybody's invited, the active visibility of being invited is really important. And then it's why this racism then has a potentially toxifying factor. If we get out of context, 30 million of us watch the game, you know, maybe a couple of thousand people are sending messages. If we get that out of context, then people say, I wasn't invited. You know, if you hit the post, you're still not English. We'll never really be invited. It's important to win this argument. Social media is so toxifying in this because my personal experience is that I live in a much less racist society than the one, you know, I saw at Goodison Park or in the playground. Nobody, I've been lucky here, other people have different experience. No one's been racist to my face since I was on a bus in Eltham in, you know, just around the turn of the millennium. But I get much, much more racism now, 2021, than I got in 1990 because of online dynamics. Got paradox of racism that in a less racist society, I'm in receipt of more racism. And that is the experience of anybody Black, Asian or mixed race who's got a public profile, because we might have got the racist group from 20% to 10% to 7% to 5%. The last 2% who are angry about how their society has changed, are angry to see David Lammy on the radio, ethnic diversity on the pitch. the old Chelsea NF Black Goals Don't Count group. They're one click away whenever David Lammy's on the radio, whenever Marcus Rashford's on the telly, whenever I'm popping up on the radio. So that racist fringe is one click away from being racist. So the technology, the shrinking of distance, but that has had a really toxifying effect, because nobody engaged, for example, with Black Lives Matter, and about a third of the ethnic minority population of Britain say they supported Black Lives Matter online. And nobody who engaged with it didn't experience racist responses as well as non-racist criticism. And so that creates that heightened sense that racism's there all the time, because social media is amplifying all of the polls, and it's giving a new network, a new opportunity to this shrinking racist group.
So social media amplifies everything that it captures, doesn't it? So if the situation you describe, this, so the data is overwhelmingly positive, but that's still based on that's still somewhere between 4 and 5 million people.
Yeah. With
the attitudes that you describe. Add social media plus, like on Sunday evening, this alcohol and the stupidity that comes with too much of it. And as you said, you put it very well, one click away from that kind of, from that kind of abuse. It's then all it takes is several thousand people to be actively doing it, plus some trolling from abroad, and the effect then, but it then dominated the national news agenda yesterday. What do you do about it, and what do you want the social media companies like Twitter to do next? Because and you've said this on social media and in your pieces, I mean, without mentioning on here the specific terms, don't want to give any oxygen to them, it's still possible on Twitter for people to say the most terrible things to you, and for it not to then be language which is deemed unacceptable by Twitter. How?
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of engagement with Twitter. I've been involved in campaigns with Twitter. I invented Positive Twitter Day several years ago as a co-production with sort of Guido Fawkes, where he does that for a day a year and I do that all year round, and we try and shift the culture. But also really, had to challenge Twitter about just the failures here. I mean, I think the football experience, the football metaphor, in fact, it comes out of football, is really useful, because I've got that experience of being a 12-year-old that was in a stadium that was very racist. By the 1994 World Cup, we changed the culture. Everton signed a Nigerian forward and that helped. But we changed the culture, but we also, we policed it. So if you were still doing monkey chanting and banana throwing, which was basically acceptable in 1987, 1994, you got kicked out by the stewards and the police. And if you took it too far, you'd be at the police station, not at the football stadium at 3 o'clock on Saturdays. So we basically enforced the norm for the very last group that were there. So all of that progress we made in society, we haven't made it in this one space, social media. And people think it's a Wild West and the rules don't apply. Of course, the laws of the land apply. Different countries, Germany's got tougher rules on social media than other countries. And it's up to the platforms about, is it all legal free speech is great, or are there boundaries about this platform? What do we want to stigmatize? And there's been some progress in the last couple of years. So dehumanizing a faith group is now not allowed. The Jews are vermin has been not allowed on Twitter since 2019, which you might think is quite late. And they didn't change it so that the blacks are vermin was also banned till about 6 months ago. But I thought that was a gap we need to change. So you can't dehumanize an ethnic group. But at the moment, most racist speech is allowed because it's free speech. Most neo-Nazi speech is allowed. Some racist behavior and abuse and harassment is not allowed, but that's where the bar is. So all of the things that the National Front used to sing at Chelsea in England, like John Barnes and Luther Blissett, black girls don't count, blacks aren't English, England is white. All of the things that we've taken out of the stadiums are allowed. Overt racism is within the rules. So we've got statements from social media companies, Twitter and Facebook, using Black Lives Matter hashtags, but blacks can't be English, black girls don't count is in the rules. So we've got this complicated debate on free speech where I just wish both sides would look through the other end of the telescope. The sort of anti-hate speech people have to say, what are we going to allow? All critique, challenge, robust discussion, disagreement about race, it's all in.
Yeah.
But stereotyping an entire group and saying, you don't count, deport all the blacks, that should be out. But deport all the blacks is in at the moment. It's in under free speech. And what I'd like the free speech advocates to do in saying, there's no right not to be offended. That's great. But where, are there any boundaries at all that we should apply? And I think racism of the kind, deport all the blacks, deport all the Jews, should be over the line. It's kind of inside the line. And so that means that the rules aren't very good. If the rules were good, that wouldn't be enough, because the capacity and enforcement is shambolic and ridiculous and terrible.
Now, the UK government, of course, is trying to put together its online harms bill, which I think is later this year. So there's quite a lot of work going on in government on this, and there does seem to be a determination to do something. How optimistic are you, firstly, about that process, about the government doing something? And secondly, just to conclude, how optimistic are you about this being fixed? Can it be done?
I'm not sure if regulation is going to know how to do it, and it's going to be very difficult. The government has got a principle in its online harms bill, and it's got an opposite principle in its academic freedom bill, and so there's a confusion here about where we are. The public are in a very interesting place in this. More in Common have done some excellent research. 7 out of 10 people think hate speech is a problem in our country, and 7 out of 10 people think too much goes on online, and 7 out of 10 people think political correctness is a problem in our country. And so it's unlike America, where there's a really polarized debate about this. People are both and. They want to work it out. And I think we've got this a bit wrong, because we're going away deleting old episodes of Fawlty Towers that is entirely trivial, and then leaving neo-Nazism up online. So I think more focus on the seriousness. What I'm optimistic about the potential for change actually is football, because football's made the changes on racism in my lifetime. West Bromwich Albion, I think, did as much as the Commission for Racial Equality to actually have the public argument, because millions of people are there. And what football's got is it's got Gareth Southgate, Marcus Rashford, Harry Kane and Prince William in its corner. And so, I would like to say there was a boycott in the spring. I would quite like Harry Kane, Marcus Rashford, Gareth Southgate and Prince William to make a few points to Twitter and say, where should the boundaries be? Let's have the conversation about what you're going to do to Facebook, to Instagram, and so on. And if they can't do it, let's have a weekend of silence on the first day of the football season in August. I would find it incredibly difficult to have a weekend of silence on the first day of the season, but that would make us have the argument that until you make some changes, we want to be there. I want to go and watch Southend United in their first non-league game for a century on the first day of the season. Tweet about it, but actually, the 2 or 3 things made a difference. Political pressure makes a difference, but it's contested, and there's a opposing pressure from America. Stars make a difference, and the football stars have a power to get heard that the think tanks and the NGOs don't. And so I think we've got an alliance there. The other thing that made a massive difference was actually the Christchurch mosque massacre, and I was having much more engaged conversations about where the rules should be after the Christchurch mosque massacre, because it was very, very clear to the social media platforms that this debate about what's offensive words, what's offensive language, does at the fringe radicalize a particular group of people who live in that milieu 24/7, and they'll go and shoot up a mosque or a synagogue. And so people were taken off Twitter and Facebook who had been left on it for a decade because something had happened in the real world. Now, that would be a really pessimistic way to make progress: more racist violence, more attacks, more assassinations. So I think the way to make progress is, 3 lines on a shirt, sit down, get a meeting, and have this debate that I think is complicated about the boundaries. I want really wide boundaries on free speech. I think the left makes a mistake because it's closing down too much. But hatred, racism and abuse, I think we should draw the line in a stronger place than it is.
Sundar Katwala, thank you very much for joining us. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button and like our video. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction on the main site, just go to the site. You can get a 30-day free trial. You get my newsletter on politics, and you get all the great journalism produced by the team. Sundar, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, thank you.